Hello, Story Seekers. 2024 is drawing to a close, and who better to share a few drams with and see in a new year than the incredible Robin C.M. Duncan. Robin, are you ready to be questioned?
I am ready. I haven't had a dram yet, but I feel as if I might need one by the end. How hard are these questions?
Right, so a train leaves Manchester at 140 miles an hour.
Oh, hang on. Right, okay.
You're going to need graph paper and a protractor.
What's the name of the driver?
So, what is the first story you wrote that meant something to you?
Oh, blimey. Can I have an easier question first? No, I mean,
You may not.
okay. The first thing I ever remember writing, let's start with that, that was fiction, was a story. I say story, it was probably a scene that involved Angus Young and Richie Blackmore.
Hell yeah.
At least them. There might have been someone else, and they were in some. I'm struggling to remember this. In some kind of a court, as in a regal court sort of setting. I have a funny feeling that Angus Young was the king because he was my favourite guitarist at the time. Yeah. Richie Blackmore was presumably some form of wizard. That would seem to be appropriate.
Fitting, yeah.
And there might even have been a little bit of dialogue, but I couldn't remember. I couldn't even begin to remember what it might have been. But I mean, if this was a drabble, then I would be surprised. But that's the first thing at all that I remember writing. But if you want story, it was probably my first novel, which I started in about 1980, 82 maybe. I would have been 16, and was reading Tolkien and Larry Niven and various things like that, and thought, do you know, I quite fancy having a go at this. I bet I could do that. And so I started writing secondary world fantasy, and about 12 years later, I had a 165,000 word story that was finished. And my wife still says it's my favorite work of hers, but I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, other than sort of vaguely doing the sort of things that Tolkien did, apart from inventing languages and anything too studious. But
Were there any other superstars of rock and roll in that one?
There were no superstars of rock and roll in that one. Unfortunately, I'm afraid not.
Barbarian leader?
No. Sorry. That would have been a good addition to the first story, though.
I know that Tolkien was very obsessed with song and music and that kind of thing in his work as well. So did you put some heavy metal ethos into that world? Do you think?
I don't know about heavy metal ethos. There were a couple of poems in it, actually, because Tolkien.
Yeah.
That were whose guiding light we're following here. So there were a couple of poems in it. And one of which actually was probably more of a chant, or possibly even a sea shanty. So yes, it could have been quite easily put to music, I suppose. I was playing in bands at the time, which is in my youth at school, which is where the first one came from. It was very much just giving it a go. But I mean, I kind of give young me a bit of a pat on the back for sticking at it and finishing it, to be honest, because there were a lot of distractions around that time.
Yeah, I bet. So that was you were sort of writing it on and off through your late teens and most.
Yeah, I mean many years before it was actually finished, and long periods when it was set to one side and not even looked at. And then quite a number of years later, my father-in-law read it for me. He was a writer of science fiction fantasy, unpublished, but he read it for me and gave me some notes. And I spent another 5 years turning it into a 225,000 word secondary world fantasy, which it is even more unpublishable than the first version, probably. But
The technical
it
stuff
was
that as a doorstop, I think.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was good practice, and I don't think practice gets enough light shone upon it in the field of writing for new writers, and aspiring writers. That the first thing you write, and obviously rules inverted commas are rules because of the exceptions, and obviously people break them, these sort of maxims all the time. But there's a good chance that the first thing you write is not going to be the thing that you publish, because you're still learning. But yes, it's a very valuable experience, I think. And,
Oh, that was a really nice story. I think thanks for that. I think you're right that not shining a light on practice is it can be quite damaging, isn't it? I think there's there's definitely something in all of us a little bit, I think, where we're like, no, it has to be perfect the first time. It has to just get it right, and it has to be. It's like, no, a first draft, a first story, or whatever. You've got to just make mistakes and learn along the way. Otherwise, you don't get anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
110%. Yeah. So,
where would you recommend that folks that are listening actually start reading your body of work now?
Well, I would suggest that my first published novel, which is actually like my 8th novel that I've written, I think, but the first one that saw the light of day in 2022 is The Mandroid Murders, which is book 1 of the Quirk and Moth trilogy as it is at the moment. But I've got another 3 books taking shape in my head, and I have promised my publisher another book 4 manuscript in, I think it's January 26. So I should probably start writing that now. That would be a good idea. But no, it start at the first one, The Mandroid Murders. It would be my
Mandroid
suggestion. Yes.
I can only apologise for distracting you from your work, by the way, to get you to come and.
Oh gosh,
come
no! Listen, maybe we'll get on to what I'm doing in the month of November at some point, which is a slightly madcap suggestion. But to stick with the novel at the moment, yeah, The Mandroid Murders. I've got some short stories published, but that was I'm really still in love with that book, to be perfectly honest, and I'm actually listening to the audiobook myself at the moment. The 3 of them are out in audio, and the 3rd one's just come out in October. And I hadn't actually listened to them before now. And the performance by A.D. Cabral, their performance is just great. I'm loving my book all over again. It's a really nice experience.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
A good audiobook is such a strong thing, isn't it? It's so important.
Was it more really cool or really weird hearing your story in someone else's voice? I feel like it's got a word towards cool.
Yes, I think it is. Yes. Well, anyway, I got a choice of narrator. The first narrator that they sent me a sample of just wasn't right, and I wasn't sure. The novels are published by Space Wizard Science Fantasy of North Carolina, and the publisher, Bill Tracy, was a friend before he was a publisher. So I kind of fell into my my book deal, which was really nice, and it was all very friendly, and there was no agents and no sort of really any publishers involved to begin with. But with the audiobooks, they went via an agent to the publisher and all the rest of it. So I wasn't really sure how much input I was going to have. So they sent me the first narrator, and I just didn't think that he was right at all for the material. And I still look back and think how relieved I am that I got A.D. Cabral as the next option, and they do just a really nice job of just the tone, and the character voices are good. They're not over the top. They're just spot on. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, and it re-energizes me. A lot of actors don't watch themselves on screen, and I think that's different. I can see why you maybe wouldn't want to necessarily watch yourself on screen in that way, but
Yeah.
something you can't change. But with the words, no, I think authors should read their own or be reminded of their own material, because if nothing other than to motivate you, that remind you that you can do it, and that presumably, hopefully, think that you're pretty good at it and you like what you do. So I would certainly recommend it. If there's authors that don't, I'd give it a try.
Wicked. It sounds so cool to have an audiobook of your novel. Is something I definitely aspire to at some point, which would be lovely. Right, okay. This next one it's Nico's favourite question, so I can't steal it from him. So I'm gonna have to give it to him.
Well, it's not really a question. It's more of a hypothetical. So if there were two writer podcasters and they were being held at one point by a powerful and capricious bibliomancer, and that bibliomancer was absolutely hell bent on getting the best novels he could for his magic library, what books would you recommend to that wizard? Hypothetically.
What books? Okay. I would say the novels of Jack Vance, who is no longer with us, unfortunately. But Jack Vance, after Tolkien, and even above Tolkien, actually, when I read my first Jack Vance novel, I was blown away. His gift for language and innovation with language. There's something incredibly colourful about his phrasing, his word choice, his depiction of scenes and characters that just blows me away every time I read one of his books. And I've read a lot of them, and I've reread some of them too, and I think he's greatly underappreciated. A contemporary of the likes of Asimov and Heinlein and these people. I mean, he published a very long publishing career. Wrote a lot of books, and crime books as well. Yes, Jack Vance's work I love. The Demon Princess series in particular is a good one. People may have heard of Leoness. The Dying Earth books are perhaps his best known, but they're not my favourites of his work. But Jack Vance, I would say, would be my number one choice.
Do you think in reading those, there were like particular lessons in storytelling and stuff that you absorbed from them?
Yes. I think I probably got my, despite the fact that the story you heard from me, in the previous episode I was in was incredibly grey and depressing and rather dreary aesthetic. The colourfulness of his language is, I think, something that I've embraced, and sometimes maybe I need to be reined back a little, but it does come out, I think, in my approach when I'm trying to have an impact with a line or a sentence that I'll throw the kitchen sink at it and maybe rein it back later, if that makes any sense.
I don't think that's the worst thing.
No, and I doubt I could ever conjure. I debate whether I've conjured any images that are quite as magical as some of Jack Vance's, but I think that's probably where I got that from.
That's lovely.
So when you are uprooting kitchen sinks, what is your actual editing process?
Editing. I have been told, so I know I'm not just making this up, that I write a fairly clean draft. And that doesn't involve me sort of going back over, endlessly kind of self-editing as I go along. I'm pretty fussy about grammar and punctuation and all that sort of stuff, and also 100 other little foibles that I bore people with when I'm critiquing their work, like word repetition in close succession and internal logic and things like that. As an engineer professionally, I like to think I've got an eye for detail,
meticulous,
and so in terms of the kind of time and motion sort of stuff, and could someone get across the room in that length of time, and that all that sort of thing. If they did fall out a 2-story window, what sort of condition would they be in? And all these little kind of niceties.
Yeah.
So I trust and I do believe from my publisher's accounts that results in a fairly clean draft, and it's sometimes more the kind of the plot stuff that maybe needs a bit more tweaking, just bits that don't convince. But I think my editing's mostly about that sort of thing where someone's maybe not gripped by, or there's not clear motivations coming through. So I'm working on things that are kind of woven through rather than necessarily doing a lot of rewriting. I think it's fair to say.
That's interesting. So how when you're doing that sort of off your own back, not necessarily working from feedback, I guess is my question. Do you have like a method for like plotting out characters' motivations? Have you sort of got yourself a cheat sheet of how to sort of process it?
To start with, sort of in first draft kind of idea.
Yeah, maybe like on your second draft, if you're like,
right,
okay, I know this is something that I need to work on, so like this is how I'm going to approach it.
So, to go from the beginning? So I tend to write an outline that might be about 2/3 of the story. I'll usually have a vague idea of where I'm going towards at the end, but more in terms of the characters rather than necessarily the physical plot, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I've outlined maybe 2/3, maybe 70% of the story. And then I write the first draft, and of course it will diverge, sometimes quite a lot from that outline. So I would say, the further I get into the first draft, I'm probably storing up some divergences or some things that need to be tied back together at the end. And I leave a lot of comments in my files that I have to, with that kind of, hesitate to say tidy brain, but it's slightly meticulous, I suppose, brain. Yeah. I've got to, the comments all have to be gone, and I don't want comments cluttering up my file. So I know if I leave a comment, it's a good way to make sure that something doesn't get lost. I'll end up with a first draft that's probably quite heavier on the comments by the end, and almost certainly that I'll have diverged enough from the outline that I need to, in the second draft, I need to be modifying someone's reaction to something, or because of it's changed where I thought they were going by the end. So very much leaving notes as I go along. I don't think I've ever gone back to the beginning before I finished the first draft, if you see what I mean.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't really see the point in, unless it was in chapter 3 or something, and I hadn't gotten very far. But very much a fix it later sort of an approach.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right on letting it finish, because you might think, oh, my character's starting to change somewhere over in the middle.
Yes.
But they might just change again later.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just I don't know why as well. I'm imagining your manuscript all on great big blue squared sheets with white lines and figure 1 written everywhere on them. I now can't get rid of that image. So, so thank you.
Building cathedrals in the sky. I love it.
Sing me a word song, Ben. So, who inspired you to start telling your own stories?
Is in terms of as opposed to an author, but someone in my life, or just whoever I.
That's an interesting counter question, because either way.
Okay. Well, the answer to the first answer is probably again Jack Vance, because I Tolkien inspired me to read, I would say, but I think it probably Vance that inspired me to write. Cool. And Larry Niven was the first. I mean, Jack Vance, to call him science fiction, I mean, yes, some of his stuff is space opera, and of course it's science fiction, but it's quite heavily sort of fantastical as well, and a bit of crossover. But Larry Niven was the first kind of harder SF, with a big big concepts like the ring world and that sort of thing. And it may have been him that directed me towards science fiction.
Yeah.
But I mean, my parents, in terms of the real world, I doubt I would have had the confidence to write probably if it hadn't been for my parents. My dad was a physics teacher, head of physics at a private school, and he bought me the books that started me off in that direction. And my mother was an artist, so she encouraged my creative side. And between them, I suspect they set me off on that path.
Yeah, that's a proper origin story stuff. A physics teacher and an artist created you.
So we're definitely not confused about how you ended up in sci-fi. That's
built me out of spare parts in the garage. Yeah, no. And as you would probably expect, there are dedications in the books to them.
Yeah.
This my second novel, the Carborundum Conundrum, which I still kind of semi-regret calling it that to this day, because you really shouldn't have to think that hard to pronounce the title of your own book.
I love it.
I suspect there's a spark in there of my dad's scientific activities and mindset in that kind of formed the kernel for that story, and it's dedicated to him and to my father-in-law, who was a GP in Canada, and the book is so that's book 2 of the Cork and Moth series, basically set entirely in Canada, almost entirely in Canada, which is where my wife's from, and it starts off in her hometown in Canada, which I visited many times. So it was a bit of a kind of an ode to my summer spent in Canada, in Creston, BC, which was something I want to do. And then the third book, The Rigel Redemption, is dedicated to the women in my life, my wife, my daughter, and my mother and my mother-in-law. So it's something I feel very, very keenly, because I don't think I'd be spending as much time as I am, basically all the hours available, doing the writing that I'm doing and really enjoying it.
Oh, gosh, that's so you've got such a lovely outlook on things. I'm really enjoying it. Thank you.
Well,
emboldened by love is a great way to be.
Yeah.
Making your writing. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Right. This one's a bit of a tricky one, but feel free to swing as hard as you want. In light of the advancement and ease of use of AI in content creation, do you feel hopeful or fearful of our future robot overlords?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there is rightly a huge kickback in the creative community against AI at the moment because of the way it's being used. It could be a force for good. It could help us a great deal, I think, as authors, if we could get it to check the logic of our plots after we'd written draft 1 and fish out the inconsistencies. Of course, you can get me started on AI, because it's not really intelligent at the end of the day. But it's got that label now, so we're stuck with it. Obviously we've been using spell checkers for decades, but without having a big debate about the technicalities. But it's these horror stories of the likes of Clark's World and other markets being deluged with hundreds and hundreds of AI, Chat GPT, other platforms are available, I believe, generated stories, and just their entire machine, their publishing system being completely jammed with this stuff and crippled until they get the hang of how to deal with it, by these furious submissions. And then you've got these, earn an income by writing novels or selling novels online that you can write in 10 minutes using ChatGPT. It's hideous. And unfortunately, there's no incentive for the AI companies to police this
No.
activity. They don't care. They just want to, obviously, to make money, I presume,
Yeah.
ultimately. And so, yeah, it's. I think there is some room for some applications of it if they were properly applied, but there's just too many people trying to make a quick buck and burn the planet down by doing it that it's just it's just very depressing.
Yeah, that's just something you just can't get away from, can you? That it is the in order to cool the servers, it's just you're sort of melting the rainforest in order to create something shit.
Yeah, it's so depressing. Far more depressing than my earlier story.
It is in light of the creativity division, though. That seems like that would be something that would exist in that world.
Oh yeah, that's the sequel, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
No, don't do it. Don't hurt me like that. So,
Pardon me while I write that down.
so hyper-capitalist tech overlord destruction aside, what themes do you find particularly appealing when you are reading fiction?
Oh, crumbs. Okay, yeah. Characters, and that's maybe an easy answer, slightly glib answer, but it's all about characters for me. You can world building's nice, but if you don't have the characters, an interesting character, then you can strive away as long as you like building your world. But I'm probably not going to be that interested. Which doesn't mean that I don't like great world building, but you know, it's the characters that always hook me and draw me in, and I think it's good advice to any writer to spend a bit longer thinking about your characters, probably before you start writing them, because I was a devotee of another podcast. I don't know if I should mention it on this one, but it's quite a. No, sorry, that was tongue in cheek. I was going to mention it. In terms of podcasts, I was brought up on the Writing Excuses podcast, formerly featuring Brandon Sanderson. I'm not sure if Mary Robinette Cole. I think she might still be on there, but and I listened to it's really where I got a lot of my training, if you like, and what I should be trying to do. Yeah. And one of the things that always stuck with me was a line that Howard Taylor used about in terms of I don't know if it's specifically character development. I think it was just in generally as an approach to creativity when you're forming your ideas. Avoid the low hanging fruit, because don't just go with the first thing that you think of. Put that aside. He's not a stable boy. He's something else. What else have we got? So going further and forcing yourself to consider a third or fourth alternative. Okay, you might not use it. You might go back because it's too ridiculous. But it's a good way. It's a good mindset to have to train yourself to go beyond the first thing that occurs to you, because it's probably the most obvious, and it's probably occurred to a lot of other writers before.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Do you think there's also something about just digging astronomically deep on the obvious one as well, and just getting really
twist it? Yeah. Make him a stable boy who's but how can you make that different? Because everyone's got a stable. Everyone used to have a stable boy. Maybe not anymore.
I had to let mine go during the pandemic. It's just ruinous.
What will your horses do?
I was duped. They sold me 2 Alsatians tied together. I didn't even know it wasn't a horse.
But no, that's a good point. Yeah, if you are just saying no, I really want to go with the stable boy option in this story. This example's getting it's taking this too far.
I'll tell you where that question came from. It came from being a bit of a devotee of Robin Hobb, and I think she is wonderful at getting so into what could be a fairly basic character concept and turning it into this thing of great artistic merit and beauty.
Yes, and I think if you have the experience and the confidence to do that, then of course you would do that, and you wouldn't think twice about just taking that option. It's probably more of a point for newer writers, I think, maybe less experienced writers, because as you say, if you do it, you can do anything if you do it well enough. You could have a party involving a dwarf and a wizard and an elf and some halflings and whatnot. You could probably write that story if you were an exceptional writer and could bring something to it that made it very different from Lord of the Rings.
Because it's a legal obligation that we mention him at least every 2 episodes. I think it was one of Terry Pratchett's great strengths was that he was obsessed with the oddness of people, and I think that makes his characters so interesting. So I feel like I know relatively little about the actual Discworld, but I know everything about its inhabitants. So I really feel what you're saying.
Yeah. The angle that he looks at the characters is very personal and weird. Not weird, but like odd. Like that's. Oh, I probably could talk about ways to look at characters all night. So let's not fray time like that.
Okay.
But I enjoyed that. I've got another question here, which is: do you feel a particular connection to a particular culture, and if so, how has that actually manifested in your writing?
Oh, good question again. Yes. Probably, I don't know, even 3 or 4 years ago, I might not have had a particularly good answer to this question, because I don't think that would have been something that would have been a particular focus of my work. But in the last couple of years, and I wonder if it was actually Worldcon coming to Glasgow again back in August this year, that made me not reevaluate. That's not the right word, but brought focused my attention on what it means to be Glaswegian.
Yeah.
The Glasgow Science Fiction Writers Circle, which I may have mentioned before, which I've been a member for about 4 years, but it's been going for it's rapidly approaching its 40th anniversary.
Wow.
It produced an anthology for Worldcon, for release at Worldcon, called Gallus, which is a very Glaswegian term, if you like, which tries to encapsulate that spirit of the Glaswegian, that sort of braggadocio, that kind of attitude to life. And so there's 25 stories, I think, from writers in the circle in that anthology. And when the call came out, and they also did an anthology, called 30 Years of Rain, which was I think came out when. No, sorry, I'm getting that. That was for the 30th anniversary. There was another anthology produced for the previous Worldcon. Anyway, the Gallus anthology for this year's Worldcon, and I thought, I'm going to write a story about set in Glasgow with Glaswegian characters, and trying to capture that spirit of what it means to be Glaswegian, but also to put that together with what it means to be a genre writer in Glasgow, because there's a terrific community, and I really wanted to kind of capture that. So I wrote a story called The Sariehead Free Press, which is in the Gallus anthology, which is available at the moment from that site online. And and I really kind of the more I sort of dug into it and started writing it, the more I almost felt a kind of strengthening of my connection to Glasgow, if you like. And I've never lived anywhere else. I've lived here for 58 years.
21 years, lovely.
Yeah,
it's quite a young thing.
But yeah, it really brought out something in me, and I did some volunteering with the Glasgow 2024 team in a couple of years, leading up to Worldcon. So I definitely felt very personally involved I mean, there were a huge team of people, as you would imagine, but yeah, it really stirred something in me, if you like, in terms of trying to express my own culture, which I really enjoyed.
It seems almost reductive to ask this like follow-up question, but do you think you could almost give us like a hint of what that culture feels like to you? Like,
Yes, I should probably have defined Gallus more specifically for the listener, for those that aren't aware. But the definition that's given in the introduction to the Gallus anthology is Gallus meaning bold, daring, or high-spirited. And
nice.
you know, I hope that's the kind of impression of Glaswegians that I would expect a tourist to encounter, for example, to be helpful, and to give directions, but possibly with a glint in the eye and a wee friendly comment to see you on your way, if you like. Point of example, I have this jacket that I wear that's my writing jacket, and it's a bit ratty, and it was second hand when I got it, and I've had it for 20 years. But I wear badges on the lapel, and I was walking down Sucky Hall Street, just wasting 5 minutes before going into the regular Glasgow SF Writers Circle meetup. I'm walking down the street, and there's these 3 guys coming towards me with a pit bull, and it's a pedestrian precinct. So, and there's people around. It's dark, and young guys, maybe late teens, early 20s, and they're kind of, you can hear them coming. You know, they're laughing and joking with one another, and you could be a little bit intimidated by that if you were, you know, you could stab a wee, what's going on here? And they walked past me, and the one with the dog just looked up and said, "Oh, I like your badges, chap." And it was, you know, it's just that kind of thing. Oh, is this threatening? Oh no, it's absolutely fine, and it's all good spirited and all the rest of it. And that's the kind of thing that kind of moment, I think, tends to capture that Gallus spirit, that someone's perfectly willing to say something in the street that you might think at first is an insult, but in fact it's not. It's just high spirits.
Yeah. Whereas in the south of England, you think it's not an insult at first, then afterwards you realise it was, which is
hang on a minute. It is truly one of my favourite places in the world, Glasgow. I've been there a few times. The band that I was in until recently played there quite a few times, and I remember the first time we played, we were supporting another band, so people were there for them. And as we were sort of plugging in amps and checking the microphones worked, a voice from the back of the room said, "Dead Man's Whiskey are fucking shite." We hadn't played a note, and then after the set, that guy came and found me and said, "I was just breaking your balls, see if you'd give up, man."
That was
the whole thing.
Spot on. That is spot on. That's exactly
lovely.
it.
I love it there. My in-laws are all in Castle Douglas, so I do get to spend a good chunk of time over the border, which I'm very grateful for.
Cool. That's excellent. Yeah, you get a lot of people saying, "Well, I've been to Edinburgh." I said, "Nah, it's not the same."
It's not the same.
I've done Inverness. That's like a different dimension.
Well, that's quite something. No, Inverness is a lovely place, but it's not Glasgow, and it's not Edinburgh. It's definitely its own place. Yeah.
So right. So yeah, what's your next project?
Now, about 2 months ago, I deleted my NaNoWriMo account, which I had been active for 10 years, I'm going to say, and I'd completed it for, I think it's 7 or 8 out of those 10 years, and the evidence of which is is available online today. My first 2 published novels came out in NaNoWriMo. Great thing. Met some nice people through that. Great spirit to it. But last year there were some rather unpleasant goings on, which the organisers did not particularly jump on top of. And I was in a group, a Glasgow Discord group that ended up leaving NaNoWriMo and sort of going independently. And then this year there's the whole AI thing about, and their policy towards AI, which, yeah, well, that's a podcast in itself, probably talking about that as we touched on earlier. So no, I thought, it's not happening. So I deleted that and I thought, well, what am I going to do in November? Because I just published the third book in July, so I wasn't going to dive straight into another novel. So I thought, everyone's got these, and I'm the same. I've got all these little scribbled bits of paper with story ideas on them, notebooks full of story ideas, and notes on phones and files on computers. I'm going to make a list of 30 short story ideas that I've really wanted to write, but I've just never gone back to. And I'm going to start one every day in the month of November. I'm going to start a new story, and I'll write as many words as I can or that I want to. And then by the end of November, or into December, I'll go back and I'll finish the ones that I really want to finish. Some of them are for specific deadlines and markets. That there's 3, I think, that I am actually due to submit stories. So it's a good way to start those. And I thought, and I'll weed out, I'll end up with a handful of stories I really want to go back and finish. So I scripted it beforehand. I chose my 30 ideas because I thought I don't want to be faffing around on the day thinking, oh, maybe I'll start this one, maybe I'll start. No, I'm going to give myself a list that I'm going to work to. And there's I think there were 10 SF stories, 8 fantasy, couple of crime, cyberpunk, grimdark, couple of cli-fi stories, and some horror stories, which I don't think I've ever really written a horror story. So, well, maybe I have now. Maybe Withdrawal is a horror story. But anyway, so I jumbled them all up, preset list, and started off. So what are we on? We're on the 14th today, and I haven't... oh, sorry, I'll take that again, shall I?
It's okay.
So, yes, I got about halfway through November and realised that I pretty much loved every single story that I'd started writing. And so there are still, there are a lot of stories there to be finished, but it's quite revealing actually that I honestly thought there'll only be a handful of these that I'll actually like enough to finish, but I really am. I'm getting into the characters of some very different stories and really wanting to know how they get through the situation I've put them in. So yeah, November is quite intense, or was quite intense, and I've still, I've got a lot of those stories to finish, but it's been a very, very, positive experience, and the idea is that I'll have lots of stories at the end of it to submit to markets, because that's something I'm not very good at doing actually, is sending out shorts and beating on the door of markets that I want to be in until I get there. So I'll have a lot of good material to do that, I hope.
That's a really positive way to have come out of that situation, I think, and to have turned yourself into a bit of a story canon instead of continuing with the NaNoWriMo thing. I think that's really cool. Really
I honestly thought I would struggle with it. Every day to come up with a new set of character, 2 or 3 characters and a new story. I mean, I had obviously the bones of a story, or the idea for a story, but it actually has boosted my confidence in my ability to.
Oh, that's fantastic.
To write a short story, because these are all, I'm really loving all of these stories. I'm going to have to go back and finish them all now. It's silver lining, if you like, and I don't know, we'll watch and see what happens to NaNoWriMo, but that's been November for me.
I'm wonderful about that. The pre-firing your own starting pistol a bunch of times, so that when you hit the day, you got to run.
Well, and the other thing I thought I might get out of it was a decent chance at putting a collection together, which is not something I've ever considered doing, but I've seen friends do with some success. with a good amount of success. One of them, E.M. Folds, put an excellent collection together and won British Fantasy Awards, something I think you're familiar with.
Yeah, but it's so nice that so many of the people that we've spoken to and know have also got a big connection to those awards, and many of them have been nominated or won before, and it's really nice. Such a great community.
I thought your characterization of you did, I think the week after, or maybe it was 2 weeks after the awards themselves, your episode, and where you described the experience of going to FantasyCon for the first time. And I mean, I'm not exactly a veteran. I think I've been to 4 now. But I thought your description of it from the perspective of a first-time attendee, or two first-time attendees, was really captured the essence of it, and
thank you,
and what it means. And I've directed a couple of people towards it who've said, "What is this FantasyCon thing?" Well, you just go to the Tiny Bookcase podcast, timestamp, blah 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 episode, because I think you just captured it really nicely.
That's really sweet.
What it means and why people should go to it who haven't been. Yeah.
Because that's fucking
really
cool.
Nice. Yeah, because it's really cool. But that's really nice to know that that's happened, because that that wasn't something we were deliberately trying to do, but it's really cool that that's happened. Yeah. For sure.
I have a follow-up. I have a question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Have you guys ever thought of putting a collection together, either individually or because you have so much material, so many excellent stories?
It's well, thank you very much. It has come to us before. We tried to do one quite early on, and we even went as far as to get some of our very early guests involved, and had a crack, and we sort of put it together and self-published it. It didn't really go anywhere. Didn't make any sales, or I think we were charging tuppence for it. It wasn't. It may have even been free at various points, but it just it was a lot of work, and it was distracting us from what we were doing, which was writing stories. Yeah. But I think it would be a really cool thing to do in the future when we know a bit more about the industry and how to publish something like that and handle it. So yeah, if you've got any tips for us, then definitely hit us up. Because,
I mean, I think you've nailed the first tip on my list, which I would say to anyone is to go to FantasyCon and throw yourself into that community, because you'll meet so many people, publishers, agents, and all sorts, who and also self-published authors in the vendors room who have been through the experience that a lot of writers want to go through in terms of getting their work out there, and you will meet people who will be only too happy to speak to you about their experience and how they went about it, and also potentially to meet publishers as well, who potentially are your you could pitch a collection too.
No, that's a really cool idea. Thank you.
No reward without risk. So whether it's giving out hot tips or starting avant-garde short story writing movements towards the end of years, where can people go to keep up to date with your news and your plans?
Facebook's probably the best place. I do have my website, robincmduncan.com. I'll be perfectly honest, I don't update it all that often. There is a kind of blog spot there, but I haven't put up a new one in a while. So most of my news does go into Facebook or to Blue Sky, because I left that other fascist cesspool that used to perform that function. But yeah, so those are the two, and I think you would just search Robin C.M. Duncan on Blue Sky, because I'm not quite sure how Blue Sky handles work. I think my handle's Robin C.M. Duncan, no spaces or dots, / whatever the Blue Sky bit is. But I those initials are all important. I do come up fairly easily on all the popular search engines.
Fantastic. Well, people should definitely go and find you and listen out for what you've got coming next, and also read the things that you've already put out. I loved your story in the last episode. Really excellently constructed and performed, and loved it a lot. So
that's very kind. Thank you.
Right, we shall release you back to the Highlands. Off you go.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?